in the course of the conversation today. So again, I want to say thank you to everyone. And I would also just want to convey the apologies of our keynote speaker who was supposed to be here, but reached out yesterday evening to say that he had an important national assignment that came up and he had to, take that up. So I apologize on his behalf, and he has promised to make good, this invitation at a later date. Now, I'll just delve straight right into it, and then right after that, introduce our panel for today. On the 14th of June, 2023, the Central Bank of Nigeria, through a circular titled Operational Changes to the Foreign Exchange Markets, introduced key changes to Nigeria's foreign exchange regime. The notable change which has dominated the headlines of national dailies is that Nigeria has now adopted a floating or sort of market-determined exchange rate, as opposed to the CBN rate, which over the years, pundits have argued did not necessarily reflect the economic realities of the market. And that explains, the huge arbitrage between what was considered as the official CBN rate and what many consider the parallel market rate. Now, this policy shift was consistent with the expressed desire of His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu for a unified exchange rate in his inauguration address of 29th May 2023, as well as the yearnings of many private businesses and analysts and even financial market investors who had been frustrated by what some referred to as the arcane rules and lack of liquidity associated with the previous era. Now, a key benefit envisaged by market participants or watchers is the elimination of the arbitrage spread, which has for the most part created an incentive for rent seeking in the FX market. I remember very vividly that in the early days of the change in policy, on a particular day, there was a convergence between the parallel market and the CBN rates, right, at the close of business on that particular day. Now, while many have argued that, apart from that benefit, there's also the benefit that a unification is a positive signal to foreign investors who consider Nigeria as an investment destination. There's a flip side to this, right? One of it being that what we have seen, a huge growth in Nigeria's national external debt stock. Publicly available data sort of suggests that Nigeria's external debt stock, as at the end of 2022, stood at $41 billion, which came to about, say, 18 trillion naira. And this was based on the official exchange rate of about 448 naira to a dollar. As of today, at the rate of 747 to a dollar, this would mean about almost a 50% rise in Nigeria's debt stock. Now, this sort of applies to Nigerian businesses, which have also seen increased debt service costs, especially for businesses who have dollar exposure. In this panel today, we have distinguished panelists who will help us achieve our goal that we have set for today, which is to foster, constructive and insightful dialogue, right, around this subject. As much as possible, we encourage, candid and open discussions amongst our panelists, and certainly we invite questions from our participants, from the audience. Now, without further ado, I will now introduce the experts who will deal with, the questions and the conversation on the subject right away. I will start in no particular order, so please forgive me. I will start by introducing Mr. Olukorede Adenowo, who is currently the Chief Executive Officer of Standard Chartered Bank Nigeria. He had previously served as MD CEO for Standard Chartered Bank Gambia and Senegal, Deputy Managing Director and Deputy Chief Executive Officer for Standard Chartered Bank Cameroon, Managing Director, Corporate Commercial and Institutional Banking for Standard Chartered Bank Nigeria and West Africa. He's also served as Non-Executive Director of SCB Gambia and SCB Sierra Leone, Vice President of the Gambia Bankers Association and Trustee of the Institute of Bankers of Gambia. He has a total of 35 years post-university experience in banking, finance, and consulting, and was conferred with the 2015 Distinguished Alumni Award by Deloitte, Nigeria, and Fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria in 2003. In his penultimate role as Africa Co-Head, Financial Institutions and Public Sector Business for SCB, Mr. Adenowo provided strong leadership in building and managing key strategic relationships across West Africa. He worked closely with several banks and governments across the region in advising them on accessing international capital markets and ultimately improving the bank's visibility in public sector for business success and growth in an increasingly stringent regulatory environment. An economist who turned chartered accountant, he was appointed Fellow of the Institute of Chartered Institute of Accountants of Nigeria in 2000. I think I said that before. He's an alumnus of INSEAD and Side Business School of Oxford University, where he had management training in leadership and holds an MBA from the Lagos Business School. Ms. Adenowo, we are honored to have you on this panel. We say thank you for joining us. Right. I will then go on to introduce another panelist. Give me one quick second. Mr. Sam Egube. Mr. Sam Egube is the Honorable Commissioner for Economic, is the immediate past Honorable Commissioner for Economic Planning and Budgets in Lagos State. He is a Fellow of the Institute of Credit Administration, member Nigerian Institute of Management, member Council for the Regulation of Engineering in Nigeria, and honorary senior member, Chartered Institute of Bankers. He attended the University of Benin, where he obtained the Bachelor of Engineering degree with a second-class upper in 1989, while he has an MBA from the prestigious International School of Management, University of Navarra, Barcelona. He has significant experience in various sectors of the economy, which include banking and finance, business consulting, engineering, strategy, financial management, and operations optimization. These experiences were acquired in very strong institutions such as Arthur Andersen and Company, what is now known as KPMG, United Bank for Africa, PLC, NNB International Bank, First Bank of Nigeria, and Diamond Bank, PLC, where he served as Corporate Banking Director and Head of Directorate, Corporate Banking. He was an angel investor and advisor on the Experts in Residence program. And his last role is with Lagos State, where he was appointed by the current governor of Lagos State, Mr. Governor Babajide Olusola Sanwo-Olu, and he held the office of Commissioner for Economic Planning and Budgets. At his leisure, he loves swimming, karate, table tennis, and counseling. Mr. Samuel Egube, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate your presence here. And I'll just introduce Ben Umegbunam, who is a partner at Dentons ACAS-Law. He is a seasoned legal practitioner whose focus is on infrastructure transactions, mergers and acquisitions, restructuring, property law, and a host of other practice areas in corporate commercial law. He started his career at Johnson & Johnson Solicitors in 1998 and has successfully risen to the position of partner at Dentons ACAS-Law, where he currently heads the financial services practice, and of course, a senior partner in the corporate and commercial department practice group. Ben has advised numerous clients on tax issues, provided legal opinions on various common law matters, FX-related matters, especially for international clients and international companies. His legal experience spans over 25 years and has had extensive experience in advising on infrastructure projects and vital transactions till date. He's a key member of the team that advised the largest provider of mobile telephony service in South Africa in its bid to acquire 50+1 shares in a Nigerian GSM service company. And Ben is unarguably a highly knowledgeable and well-seasoned legal practitioner. He's a member of the International Bar Association and a member of the Chartered Institute of Taxation. And the last but by no means least is the Honorable Commissioner for Finance and Budgeting in Ekiti State, Honorable Akintunde Oyebode. Mr. Oyebode is an economist passionate about sustainable development, finance, investment, and youth employment. He began his career as a research assistant at the Lagos Business School and spent over a decade in various banking roles with First City Monument Bank and Stanbic IBTC, where he was the country head for SME banking. He was also the pioneer executive secretary of the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, where he led the development of programs that provided loans of over 6 billion naira to about 10,000 beneficiaries, employability training for 5,000 unemployed Lagosians with job placement to almost 2,000 people, and workspace vouchers for 100 startups. During his time at LSETF, the institution supported the creation of about 100,000 jobs in 3 years, leading to a verifiable reduction in Lagos State unemployment rate, despite an overall increase in unemployment across Nigeria. In March 2020, Mr. Oyebode voluntarily left his role at LSETF and was subsequently appointed as a special advisor in Ekiti State, a special advisor to the governor of Ekiti State on investment, trade, and innovations, and Director General of the Ekiti State Development and Investment Promotion Agency. In this role, he was responsible for Ekiti State's investment promotion activities and business environment reforms. He led the attraction of investment announcements of over $2 billion in less than 2 years. So Oyebode is currently the Honorable Commissioner for Finance and Economic Development of the Ekiti State Government. Honorable Commissioner, thank you very much for joining us. We truly appreciate, and I should just mention that in spite of his tight schedule, I understand that there's a State Executive Council meeting ongoing right now, but he gave us the honor of, participating in this webinar. We do not take it for granted, sir. Thank you very much for being here. Okay, now having dispensed with the introductions, I guess we'll just dive into the meat of the matter. And maybe I should just start by asking the question that came with the topic of the webinar, and that will be, do we have a unified exchange rate as of today? So just to help our listeners understand, or the audience understand, the nomenclature or the reality on ground. I don't know, maybe I should start with Mr. Adeno, who is still the banker with us here today. Thank you, sir, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dentons, and thank you, co-panelists. Don't forget that, the Honorable Samuel Igube, Honorable Aki Oyebode are all bankers as well. But no, thank you. If you look at a bit of history in the past 8 years, you realize that there were several exchange rates and several windows, for different transactions. And to that extent, you can argue that at least within the central bank's purview and within the money markets, or should we say financial markets, from having PTA rates, petroleum products rates, retail auction rates, I&E rates, wholesale auction rates, FPI rates, there were all sorts of different. Right now, we have just one I&E rate, and so we can argue that indeed there is a unified exchange rate. Second point is no government recognizes a black market, so don't talk about unification of a parallel market and the official market. Anywhere in the world, the parallel or alternative market runs by itself, separately. So to that extent, I would say within the official financial market, we have today unify the exchange rate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, since you've introduced, and forgive me, Mr. Igube and the Honorable Commissioner, since you've introduced them as bankers as well, we might as well just get their thoughts on this subject. Mr. Igube, if you don't mind, please.
Well, Korede is right. The point is that trading of foreign exchange, right, happens in every economic environment. And so when we speak about unification, you are speaking about the unification of largely the rate at which the central bank will trade. Now, incidentally, the central bank is the biggest trader or the biggest interventionist in the foreign exchange market. So once they've come out with one rate, you can really say largely it's unified. So Korede is perfectly right in his views of it, and I actually support that position.
Very much, sir. Thank you very much. Honorable Commissioner, would you want to just chip in any different thoughts or insights you might want to provide?
I'm being muted. For some reason, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly, sir.
Okay, so my video has been disabled, so if you ask me the host to enable my video. But I think generally, there's a unification of rates. Obviously, as we know, there are multiple markets. There's an official market, there's a parallel market. And as we see better liquidity in the foreign exchange markets, we expect that there will be a convergence of those rates. But if you look at what happened in the past, so both speakers are absolutely right. Under the old regime, there was a rate for everybody. There was a rate for customs, there was a rate for importers, there was a rate for, about 7 or 8 different rates depending on who you were, which was a complete joke. So just harmonizing and unifying that, saying if you approach the official markets, you will all buy at a single rate, is a significant improvement from where we're coming from. So there's a unification in the official market. Of course, depending on liquidity, there will always be a spread between the official market and the parallel market rates. And as liquidity improves, and as more FX is supplied, you will find that more transactions will move from what is a parallel market, activity to the official market. So there's the unification of rates, definitely, which is a major step in improving, I believe, the overall performance of the foreign exchange market.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you for that insight. So again, really, it does appear then that we still have a liquidity problem, right? And that once we solve that, the realities of the unification will then, the benefits of the unification will then begin to manifest. Thank you so much. So I will just go on to the next question, which is something that if we go out there, when people talk about the benefits of this unification, one thing that comes to mind is the potential, the potential to contribute to bolstering, investor confidence in the market and attracting FDI. I, for one, will argue that it's not a silver bullet, right? But I certainly would want to know what your thoughts are, because it sort of does not follow that if we create this unification, then investors will come crawling. I don't know if Mr. Honorable Commissioner, would you want to start out with that? Yeah.
Okay, so I think, yes, I think there's a general sense that people believe once you unify markets or your rates, money comes in. I think it's first important to distinguish what kind of flows you expect, right? So on the wholesale side, there's foreign direct investment, which requires a lot of heavy lifting. Now that's a lot more stable inflow, right? But that requires improvement in the business environment. It requires an active courting of investor communities, and it requires a lot of work between the federal government and subnationals where the economic activities take place. Now, the portfolio investment, which is effectively investment in securities, whether it's in the stock market, whether it's in the fixed income market, is a bit more, it's a lot hotter, right? So that money is very fluid, it comes and goes, responds very quickly. to improvements in rates in other markets. So again, it's not so much of just what Nigeria does, because if the Fed sneezes, we catch a cold, right? So there's a lot of external factors that affect FPI. Now, the truth of the conversation is that it takes time, right? And investors want to see a coordinated set of reforms before taking a bet on the country. So there's some time between when you reform the FX markets, right, and when you start to see an improvement in flow. So it's not an immediate, transition. So that's one thing that we all need to understand. The second thing, and I think in my opinion, is while you're waiting to do that, there are a number of things, and I think we'll discuss that later, that government can then do, right, to improve short to medium term liquidity, right, in the market, and I also think, honestly, my general point on this thing is we have a fixation on exchange rates, right? So here we are on a Wednesday morning, we've brought people together to talk about exchange rates. It doesn't happen in any country in the world, right, where everybody has a view on the exchange rate. The exchange rate is a lever for your economic policy, right? So devaluation by itself is not a bad thing, right? It's why is the currency being devalued? Is it part of an export-focused strategy? Because if you want to have export discipline, for example, you benefit from a devalued currency, right? You make imports more expensive, you make exports more competitive. But what then happens is that there's a translation in the income levels in the country, right? So I don't think the Koreans debate how much the kwon is exchanging to the dollar. It's a Nigeria debate that is unnecessary. But here we are where we are. We can't debate that anymore. But my view is that, look, it will take some time to see the benefits in the FX market, but the interventions we can do to, just as, I hate to use that word palliative, but just to moderate, the level of devaluation we're seeing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner. I guess that one of the reasons why many people are agitated about this, especially when it comes to the value of the money in one's pocket. I think it counts for much, right? Ms. Adino, please, it would be helpful if you also just shed a bit of light on what Honorable Ibode has just addressed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Doctor. Clearly, it's not a silver bullet. At the risk of repeating what Honorable Ibode has said, you need a raft of different interventions. The list, of course, is doing business. You just have to make business easy. And then don't forget that capital, will only go to where it can exit. So if there's no exit route for capital will not come in, while either FDI or FPI. They must be able to see a way out. And I liken it to current accounts, or putting your money in the bank. Why are banks successful? Why do they continue to attract deposits? Because they know that anytime they want to get their money, they can get their money at any time. Very, very simple. It's the same thing with investors and money coming into a market. If you know you can take your money out, clearly you bring your money in. Look at the risk of also diverging. Look at the Western markets. What do they produce? What really would you say is made in UK? Almost nothing. But because they know, everybody knows that they can get their money out, you take your money there. I mean, apart from financial services, what really do they produce? So it's ease of access, ease of entry, so the flows will continue. That said, the initial initiative is unify, have one rate. So you have the transparency, you have the accountability, and you reduce at least uncertainty, right? Then liquidity is something you need to work on in terms of the supply, so that at least the flows, the confidence comes back and the flows come and go. Look at the creative sector. The creative sector, at least as at the last GDP, was about $5 billion. It may have doubled, right? A lot of these guys, you hear them shutting down some arena in New York, O2 Arena in London, here and there. If there's no ease of entry and ease of access, the money will not stay out there. The dollars will stay out there. So other initiatives which the government, I believe, is working on, both sovereign and the sub-sovereign, to assist with the ease of business, to assist with those flows, need to also come in. And I'm sure they're working on it so that we can get some stability, in the exchange rate, and to address Aki, so that we stop focusing on these so-called exchange rates. I was in this market in 2006. Central bank hardly sold FX into the markets. Hardly. 06, in fact, the Naira was appreciating. The Naira appreciated significantly. And we'll get to that stage where when you keep your dollars, you keep your wealth in dollars, you will now start being forced to convert to Naira, and spread your risk because you see that you're actually losing money. I'll pause here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. And that's really insightful. Thank you. So maybe in the same line of what Mr. Noah had just addressed, Honorable Sam Ebube, so in practical terms, are you able to just give us some indicators or some pointers as to what the CBN or the government, for instance, could do to ensure stability and predictability in this forex market? The goal being to prevent, these abrupt fluctuations that actually affect businesses and impact investment.
So thank you very much. Corey said certain things which it's important for me to highlight. It's about flows. It's about the net flows. And I mean, there are countries that pride themselves as, or states that pride themselves as financial centers. You hardly see the major things that they export, but because the flows go through them, you are able to see some strength and some stability in the way their foreign exchange position.
It looks to me like we seem to have lost. We seem to have lost the Honorable Commissioner, Mr. Sam Ebube. Okay.
What? I think Sam is
okay.
back.
Sorry, we lost you for a few seconds. If you don't mind, just going. Yes, sir.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that it doesn't matter how big a bank you are, if all your customers ask for their money at the same time, right, the bank will go down. So you have things that are happening in the normal course of business. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, clearly.
Can you hear me? Okay,
yes.
That are happening in the normal course of business. And there are things that are coming as a result of panic behaviors. All of those are human. Now, if you want stability, then you want a situation where you minimize panics. And that is where you have things around transparency, things around accountability, things around predictability of foreign exchange policies, and allowing lead time for the market to respond normally rather than to respond in a panic way. You also remove room for speculators who are guessing, because there's enough information flow in the economic environment that allows for rational behavior. So when we take positions as governments, we must take positions in anticipation of ensuring that we even out the behaviors that people are able to predict it. One of the other things that happens is the confidence that you are able to continue to trade. And sometimes you need to demonstrate that capacity in your reserves and in the amount of what I would call stopgap loan or bridge loans that just say that you can trade at that level, right? Where your reserves is not able to give those assurances, then it is important to create bridge stocks, right? That gives the entire market some confidence that you are able to do that to ensure that that stability happens. But it's not only a monetary issue or something for the CBN alone. There are also fiscal levers that need to be pulled through in the way we organize our duties, in the way we facilitate exports, to ensure that the supply side also looks great, right? And I give some examples. So if, for example, you are able to strengthen our commodities in a manner that they have good access to markets. They are able to compete in terms of their price positioning. They are able to ensure that we have great storage and they do not lose their commodities because of very poor storage. The logistics of things, right, are such that their goods can get to market efficiently. Then you begin to see that behavior. Above all is quality, right? If the quality of things that come out of you, and I'm saying all forms of quality, you find out that the demand for your goods or your services goes down, and therefore the amount of flows coming in is also low. So talking about that, you must also take up your production. So when you look at our sources of FX, I pick one. If you take crude, for example, it's not benefiting us to ensure that our production is unable to get to the market because of oil thefts, right? We also look at things like diaspora remittances. I think it's something, I mean, it has all kinds of negative connotation, but I think it's an export market for us as well. It's export of your human resources, right? And it has a lot of positives in terms of how it contributes to flows. I mean, in 2020, diaspora remittances was about $17 billion and your net crude was about $3 billion. So maybe NNPC, the P there should have been people. So how do we ensure we increase our production? Because if your production is not enough to even satisfy your economy, then the jackpot thing begins to hurt badly. But the truth is, if you do not support and deliberately organize it, right, then you have a black market in the jackpot environment, like we're trying to avoid. So I think we need to begin to increase production because the world seems to be asking for our people. We train doctors cheaper than they can train their doctors. And just by passing a few exams, they become internationally accepted. We need to increase that production because some people will not go and some cannot go. So those who go will then become a formidable part of skill transfer, diaspora remittances. Some of them will go into government internationally and negotiate favorable terms in favor of Nigeria based on corporate nationality, right? We need to look at all of that. I mean, if you go most places now, the Filipinos control the ships. They control the governances or what we call house helps in Nigeria around the world, right? I mean, Indians today man some of the biggest technology companies in the world, right? But they also have significant inflows. So apart from foreign direct investment, you have diaspora remittances coming in, and we need to get involved in a positive way. We also need to begin to ensure that we encourage local production in our supply chain, right? And just this unification in itself tends to facilitate exports. Because I think Korede did say so, and Commissioner did say so, that as it can be a deliberate policy even to aid. I remember that the US was in contention with China, that they were deliberately devaluing their currency. So it's not necessarily a bad thing whether your currency is up or down. That is just a position. What matters really is how stable it is, how predictable it is, how transparent it is, that allows investors go in and out. But beyond that, the environment for business needs to be very strong. The infrastructure around business, where business is done, also needs to be very strong to ensure that we then get that kind of stability that we seek. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samigube. This is a masterclass, actually. I have taken a lot of notes, and I'm wondering whether you okay, I'll leave that. But it's clear to me why you held that position as a policymaker within Lagos State. I must thank you. This is succinctly put, and we're extremely grateful for your position on this. So the next question.
Sorry, Dr.
Oh, yes, please.
At the risk of stealing your moderating rights, I think that specific point needs a lot more discussion, because that's the crux of the matter, right? And I think fundamentally the problem is Nigeria's trade policy has largely been driven on the back of import substitution. And we often focus on, we're a large economy of 200 million plus people. So let us prevent imports, right? But the conversation really should be one of export discipline, right? And it should be, first, how do we dominate exports within the sub-region? So West Africa first, across the region, and then possibly globally, right? And so that's why every time there's some variation in crude prices, we suffer from flows, right? Because outside of crude, the non-oil, FX contribution is negligible. But so that's first a maybe 10-year trade policy, right? That I think that the country has to focus on, just designed towards export discipline. So today we're talking about looking for FX, right? But if you are an exporter, if you speak to British American Tobacco, they will tell you they have 27 forms they have to complete, right, to export out of Nigeria, right? They have to deal with 12 or 13 different agencies at different places to export. If you are exporting bananas, right, today, it will mean that customs cannot come to inspect. They don't even do risk-based inspection of your produce. So they would inspect every pallet of a perishable commodity leaving the country. It means that by the time this thing is approved for exports, you've lost 20% perhaps of your stock. So just aligning us as a country towards export discipline is a major thing that we have to shift. It's a major shift in our mindset from a trade perspective. But in the short term, I think there are certain things that bode well for us as a country, right? Now, the important thing is that we must learn from the mistakes of the past. So if you look at where crude prices are going now, crude prices are starting to rise, right? And production, it's the right time because production is rising for us, right? So FX flows are going to increase, but then a lot of it is going to, if we are not careful, will be spent recklessly. That's number one. Two is that in the short term, the president has started the conversation well by going to the Middle East to say, look, give us some sort of a bridge on FX flows. Egypt did this when their FX markets were under significant pressure, right? So a 5 billion, 7 billion in quotes loan, quasi loan, that you repay over a 24 to 36 month period helps to bridge some of your short-term FX challenges. Three, and I think, it's good that my boy Korede Adeno is still the active banker here. And one of the things I've been asking, my friends and colleagues at the Bankers Committee is speak to the central bank and ask them, why don't they sell the FX component of the Federation account on the I&E window, right? Every month, $900 million to $1 billion comes to the Federation account. What the CBN does today is that they hold that money, they sterilize it, right? Because they want to boost reserves. And then they print Naira against that and share to the 3 tiers of government, right? Our view is that you should sell that money directly to importers and exporters. I mean, sell it on the I&E window, right? Because that then brings predictable liquidity. You have maybe even 70% of that, $600 million on a monthly basis of predictable liquidity into the FX market. And its predictability, everything Sam has said here is about reducing volatility of the markets. I think for me, a fourth and final one would be, there's a lot of stranded multilateral financing that is stuck today because we do not have an external borrowing plan approved by the Federal Executive Council and National Assembly. Now that has to be a priority issue because that unlocks 4 to 5 billion of stranded FX flows, right? And yes, people will say it adds up to your borrowing, etc., your external borrowing, but these are concessionary loans that have long moratorium periods that allow you to deploy these resources properly, to rebuild your FX markets. So I don't think that it's all doom and gloom, right? I think that there's some short-term stuff that we can do today, but the longer-term play is how do we move our focus from import substitution to export discipline? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Doctor, I will steal your thunder.
By all means, please go ahead.
Let me support Aki. So honorable, I would also say that for you to actually pursue, a very efficient and focused, export strategy, we must dominate production. We must improve our production capacity. Now, to be fair to the country, yes, we've seen a lot of abuse in a lot of interventions, but quite a number of interventions like this DCRR, like this BOI loan, quite a number of those interventions, even the regulatory interventions, the, what do you call this one? List of 41, 42, or 43 items. Whilst Nigerians were complaining, a lot of local companies owned by foreigners were going into those 41, 42, 43 items and expanding their production. They were backward integrating. You know these groups we're talking about. They were backward integrating. They were increasing their production. So backward integrating because they couldn't import the inputs. They were increasing their capacity because they could get single-digit loans from CBN via DCRR or via BOI, and they were improving their capacity. So a lot has happened. I saw, the first recession I saw was austerity, 1982. That's the first one I saw. And then our shelves were empty, completely empty. I don't know who remembers. Look at subsequent recessions. Our shelves are not empty. More of those goods are made in Nigeria. If you look at the expansion of these local corporates that are foreign owned, they've dominated Ota. To further expand, they've dominated from Isheri all the way to Shagamu. They are pushing out the churches and the mosques along that axis and are producing and continue to expand. You will be amazed what is going on along that axis. Look at Lekki Free Trade Zone. I mean, Honorable Ebode was part of it when he was in Lagos State. Honorable Sam was there, front and center. What is going on there? So, dominate, improve, increase capacity to reduce our imports, focus on exports, remove all the bottlenecks. Moving your container from Shagamu to the ports, for goodness sake, should not take a fraction of what it takes to ship goods from China to Lagos, for goodness sake. So I'm sure we'll go into infrastructure as well, and the initiatives for infrastructure to actually boost the exports. But all these have to be done, concurrently. We must boost production capacity, then focus on those exports. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you. And this is much appreciated. And just please feel free to take the moderation rights as you will, please. Because again, we want to hear from you, right? Okay, so I will just address an issue which is quite interesting for us. Again, working with government establishments or the different tiers of government. Part of in the introduction of when I was introducing, I sort of made clear that one thing that's happened with this unification is the increase of our debt stock. Now, I'm sort of wondering how this has impacted. I'll go back to the Honorable Commissioner and Mr. Sam Egube, just to give us a sense, at the subnational level, how this unification might have impacted your states, or how it impacts states generally, and whether there are any ways to mitigate this, especially for those states that have foreign borrowings.
Okay, so I think first thing is Nigeria is a very unique federation in terms of the fiscal operation of our federation. So in many markets, you'll find that the sovereign takes the exchange rate risk, right, on foreign borrowings, right, FCY borrowings of the subnationals or the regions, as the case may be. So Nigeria is pretty much the only one where the subnationals bear, exchange rate risk. But for me, it balances out because the federation in itself earns a significant chunk of its revenue in foreign currency, right? So, I mean, if you think about where the Federation earns a lot of the revenues from, it's from, NNPCL's dividends, which are primarily in dollars and exchanged for naira. Some of the petroleum-related taxes are also dollar-denominated taxes. Some of the revenues from customs and excise duties, also foreign currency denominated. So a significant chunk of the earnings of government comes from FX, right? So in a sense, there's no mismatch of currencies, right? So you'll find that today, even though the naira has devalued significantly, on a purely fiscal perspective, we've started to earn more naira, right? So it kind of evens out. Where I think the impact on governments and subnationals will be is not different from the impact on corporates. It's in the increased cost of carrying out government activities. So I can tell you categorically that, for example, and to Mr. Adeno's point around expanding production capacity, if you take road construction, right, your asphalt, your inputs, right, are all FX denominated, right? Because you're importing all of these things, whether it's bitumen, So to build a road today, a lot of the steel, some of the steel comes from outside Nigeria, right? Some of the inputs comes from outside Nigeria. So once you see a devaluation, you see your contractors immediately coming for variation, right? To equip hospitals today, most of the equipment is imported, right? And so again, from when you order to when you pay, there's a significant cost differential, right? Even in your OPEX, right? Diesel is a big cost element, right? Even for some of us that have independent power plants, the pass-through cost of CNG, right, of natural gas, again, is priced in foreign currency. So there's a pass-through, cost of doing business, right, which is not just government suffering, but even corporates as well as suffering from some of these things. So that's really where I think it bites. But what we, for example, have done is to say on core projects, on core contracts, we will try to front load as much of the payments as possible, right, to ensure that our contractors and suppliers can buy in bulk and hold prices and minimize any variation. So again, it's a painful conversation because it has cash flow implications, right? It means that you have less cash to hold. But my position is that as a government, I'd rather go and borrow naira at 23%, right, and lock my pricing today than say I want to self-fund this and be open to the volatility of an uncapped risk, right, on FX volatility. So again, that's why the predictability of the FX market is very important. It's not that your naira has devalued 40%. That's not the problem. It's that you can go to bed on Monday at a certain price and wake up on Tuesday and see a 40% devaluation that you couldn't price into your production process, right? The moment you have predictability that if XYZ is happening, we know that markets will move in a month. Businesses have time to react to that move, and governments as well. So I think that's where the impact has hit us much, not necessarily on the borrowing side, because that side is covered, because a lot of the revenues that come to us in any event are FX, source revenues that are then exchanged into naira. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me just come in.
Okay.
Can I go ahead?
Go ahead.
So when we talk about the debt issue, sometimes it's easy to say because the foreign exchange has moved against you, your debt position has gone up. And that is true for dollar-based loans, for subnationals, and for the firm. However, when you talk about the country, your dollar loans remain your dollar loans. It does not devalue because they are dollar loans. And your naira loans are your naira loans. Now, it's an accounting narration when you want to now present your entire book in naira, and you have to convert your entire book to naira. So it makes your dollar loan look bigger in naira. But the converse is true. If you want to convert your entire book into dollars, then the naira loans look smaller as well. So it's neither here nor there. And the commissioner had mentioned, you are not going to be servicing your dollar loans with naira flows as a national, as a sovereign. You will service it with your dollar flows, and you will service your naira book with your naira flows. Now, you should also observe that with this unification, you actually get more naira as a sovereign, as people, due to the exchange rate, put more naira for the same dollar. So that means that your ability and the ratios of your revenues or your positions to service your naira book actually gets better, right? And your sustainability in that regard, because you've removed a lot of the subsidy that used to exist, actually begins to look better. And you are able to then do more, right? Just by that positioning, right? It's also nice to think about what it does to foreign flows as well. So if I were based in London or based in New York, and I was trying to buy a house for 450 million and I was unable to, suddenly with the devaluation, I'm able to. So that foreign currency that would not have come because that investment was too high for me will then happen. So I expect to then see more foreign flows from remittances, for example, because the threshold, the hurdle rates around which they need to make those investments, and also even the risk profile, because the risk profile also has something to do with the size of the investment, begins to change in complexion, right? People can do more properties and do all that. Like I said earlier, it will stimulate export just because of the differentials, and it will reduce or moderate what I will call imports. Now, all of those things are things that will be happening. So in terms of debt, yes, you will see the implication just because of the way the policy went in abruptness on the subnationals. But what the commissioner has said, is true in how you respond to this kind of thing. So in Lagos, for example, if you look at our budget for 2022, you will see that our deficit position was 521 billion. And that was because we were uploading things up front because we knew the economic headwinds were coming. It's the only reason why we're able to complete the blue line and we're able to progress like that, because we've taken steps ahead to hedge it. So when you look at 2022 budget, the deficit position has come down to 350. Now, the whole idea is to be able to maneuver what is coming. It goes back to the point all three of us have made here about the predictability of things. How forward-looking can you look at? Even the way you hedge against foreign exchange risk is a function of predictability as well. If you are going to wake up and receive very big shocks. So you can see now that they are beginning to say, okay, listen, what's the component of import in our cement? Should we use cement roads now instead of asphalt roads, right? Because the cost based on the FX position is such that they are comparative, and then the concrete roads will last longer. And that was what we saw when we ensured that, look, it will solve two things in terms of longevity. When we made the Lekki Ekpe Expressway reinforced concrete to go into that. But you then have to begin to do things as a state to support national posturing in terms of policy direction. So when you see the entire Lekki deep sea port, it's to enhance that trade that is going on and enhance to make Lagos look like a hub, right? That port on completion will be 3 times at the size of a Papa port, right? And it will help us in the fight for the African Continental Free Area. If you don't know, the Lagos-Badagry Expressway is a federal road, but Lagos asked for it as a concession up to Ikoko to enlarge it from a 4-lane highway to 10 and put the blue line in between. Why? That is the major West African trade corridor. Now, as flows come in and out, like we talked about London and the rest, the goods may not be ending in Nigeria, but they may be flowing through Nigeria. And just by virtue of the flows in and out, you tend to have a positive net flow, right? We are investing in what we call a food security systems and logistic base. And what is that really? The whole idea is to be able to stimulate production up country, because Lagos is the largest food market in sub-Saharan Africa. So we want to be able to control. I mean, when COVID came, we ran out of food, right? Because the supply chain was broken. Now, what that place will do, it has storage, cold storage and dry storage that can probably hold the demand of Lagos for about 3 months. Now, but more importantly, is the transparency that we want to create there. So we're able to influence the production quality of things like tomatoes up country and all those things, right? And because of that quality influence, right, you create pathways for investments into logistics, cold trucks, and the rest. And with the deep sea port, you are able to then control the market. So what will then happen with the Lekki deep sea port? Today, we control 22% of the ship and logistics business in West Africa, right? Lome controls 26, even though 80% of what is happening in Lome comes back into Lagos. With the Lekki deep sea port, we shall control about 45 because it's the deepest point in the continent. So all of those kind of things around tightening reform for properties will help production, which Korede was talking about. If you stand on a high rise in Lekki and look at all of those properties, 80% of them were built out of pocket. Can you imagine if they have titles and they can then release those funds into the economy through mortgage loans into their businesses? If the shop owners in Okeanri can get titles, for example, and then invest in their businesses, which they know, you will see that production would multiply and it will help the entire objective of what we are trying to do. So yes, it might look as if debt goes up if you convert it from an accounting perspective, but really just leave them in dollars and leave them in naira, and the debt remains the debt, and the flows that we service them remains the flows that we service them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please go ahead, Mr. Dino.
I would also jump in. Now, yes, debt stock goes up in naira terms. Of course, we are hedged. For the federal government, we are hedged because we have a natural hedge with the flow of dollars. I'm sure one of the honorable members had mentioned that. But what is particularly concerning about me is these assets that we acquire with foreign debts. Can we even run them optimally and efficiently? Please, anybody on this virtual seminar, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Lagos-Ibadan train, 2023, we are selling tickets in cash. Cash. Not electronically. Half of the people on the train are not paying. That is a $3 billion investment, foreign borrowing from China. How do we pay back? How do we pay back? Yes, there's an element of conversion. You need to get the naira to convert to dollars. Dollars may not be available. But what about when you don't get the naira at all? And there are lots of assets like that. Compare that with Blue Line. Yes, there may be an element of subsidy, but you can see that is relatively appropriately priced because they know they're going to pay back the loan in dollars, I assume. But Lagos-Ibadan train, check out all the comments on social media. Half of the people free of charge. Because those who are running it, NRC, I don't think we have an experience of an efficient NRC probably in the last maybe 30 years. Before that, probably they were efficient, of course. For the last 30 years, they didn't even have real stock, adequate real stock to even run an efficient operation. Now they've been saddled to run a $3 billion asset, and they're selling tickets in cash. Half of the cash goes into the pockets of the station, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. How do we pay back the debt? Before we start talking about the size of the debt due to devaluation, let's even optimize the assets that have been acquired with these debts, first of all. So any stakeholders here, please tell Federal Ministry of Transport, in all this, what do you call it, just ordinary Johannesburg there, the how train, everything is electronic. Money goes directly to the state coffers. It's a disgrace. It's so embarrassing. I'll pause here.
Thank you very much.
Just a quick update for Mr. Adino. I think what the federal government, and I'm not holding brief for NRC, and my view is very clear. I think that NRC should not be a regulator and operator. I think that's. But what the government has done is it has started to concession the collections on all the major routes. And so I think Secure ID is one of the concessionaires. I think they have Abuja, Kaduna. I don't know where the Lagos-Ibadan gauge, where the concession is at the moment, but I know that a concessionaire had been shortlisted. So what you will see very soon, and I imagine that ICI, the problem is just how long it takes to get concessions approved because of all the bureaucracy around that. But I imagine that before the end of the year, there will be a concessionaire for that route. And then, of course, there has to be a conversation on pricing. And not just on the rail, even on the roads, and even just the discipline to take a lot of that debt into revenue-earning assets. So not just for social assets, but for revenue assets. Thank you. Just to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, Korede, just to clarify that the blue line was a single-digit Naira loan using the DCR window, right? And so and upon completion, those two rails will move 30 million people and shorten their journey time from 2.5 hours to 30 minutes. Again, speaking to the production, which you are talking about, productivity. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
What we're saying is that the FX risk has already been covered upfront.
Yeah, completely.
Now, for Honorable Oyebode, it's not even so much the operator of Lagos Ibadan. It can very well be NRC, but 3 years of leakage. Why couldn't we start with electronic purchase of tickets? 3 years of leakage. That loan can be more than 20 years. 3 years of leakage, half of the revenue is even gone. It can very well be NRC, but why not electronic? So that we close the entire leakage. That really is my point, Honorable. Thanks.
Thank you very much, sir. And I think the lessons are taken, and like the Honorable Commissioner had mentioned, we're also aware that a lot is being done with, concessioning the collections, and perhaps the NRC would return to efficiency with those recoveries. And maybe I want to just say congratulations to Mr. Igube, with the work, the quality of work put into the negotiations for the Blue Line, and at least we're on your side with the Red Line, and we see the kind of work, the astuteness, and that you have brought into the negotiations, and we believe that hopefully negotiators will begin to enjoy the benefits of the Red Line as well in the shortest possible time. Okay.
Thank you.
So I will just, with these changes, some people have asked, rightly or wrongly so, about the continuing value of the CCI or ECCI, as we call it, right? The certificate of capital importation in the face of a unified exchange rate. Now, Mr. Onegunam, I will turn to you on this one. Do we still need the ECCI or the CCI in the face of this unification, especially for businesses that want to bring in FX into the country? Do we have Mr. Onegunam?
I doubt.
Can you? Yes. Okay. My video is not showing. Can I go on?
Yes, please go ahead, sir. They would fix that.
Okay. So, thank you. And let me thank our speakers. The session has been stimulating, very wonderful indeed. And as a firm, we are most grateful. So what is the CCI or ECCI for? Electronic Certificate of Capital Importation. That is the ticket of anybody that makes foreign direct investment into Nigeria, tickets to the official market. You come in, you bid for, your bank bids for you, and you're able to take your money out through official channels. For a long time, it was essentially CBN funds before the market reforms that took place, the creation of the I&E window, and of course now the further liberalization with the unification of rates. So we are where we are now, and where we are essentially is that it is the attitude of the CBN that it's supposed to be on a willing seller, willing buyer basis. So clearly, in my own opinion, that should whittle down the importance of a CCI. However, we have seen that from time to time, depending on the way rates go, the CBN also would need to intervene in the market in order to stem rates from falling below what the CBN is comfortable with and to keep the market at a certain level, which the CBN believes should be what it is in order to sustain the economy. So I will say that to that extent, the attitude of the CBN will still be that it is only those that they can confirm that actually brought money into Nigeria that should come to the market and bid for FX at rates that are affordable. We know very well that there are other markets for FX which the CBN does not regulate. We call it parallel, we call it alternative, we call it whatever, to the extent that the CBN has unified those multiple rates that confuse everybody. You know, we used to have rates for people going for Hajj, rates for electricity people, rates for aviation people, and all sorts of things. So the CBN has taken away all of that. So far as the CBN is concerned, for all legal and for all official transactions, there is one rate. And I don't think that there is anything I can say that will make the CBN happy to provide any form of financial assistance in the form of FX to people who do not have evidence that they brought in money into Nigeria through official channels. So my own thinking is that irrespective of what we say, the ECCI will still be with us for some time to come.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, sir.
That is very correct. Before the demarcation of I&E and retail and wholesale, and I'm sure some people, a bit of humor, some people remember FEM, IM. There was another FEM, W-DAS, R-DAS, anyway. So before all this, we had the CCI. And what was the CCI for? 1, record keeping, 2, reporting, 3, authentication. Of course, don't forget, CCI, especially for currency inflow as against capital goods, CCI forces conversion. So it forces the investor to convert within 24 hours. So it forces the flow to come in. So those are still very relevant today. And I dare say CCI will still be a part of us for some time to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Just looking at it this way. So for the CBN, of course, they could force the dollar to come. But in terms of preference for the investors, for instance, will there be incentives on the part of, I mean, what is the real incentive for them to go that route? Because again, availability of the USD when they want to exit the market is key for an investor who is coming in, right? So again,
don't forget that there is what you call, and the bankers will know, there's what you call 2 checks, you know, so, which the CBN is trying to stamp out. The official one goes in at 770 in the official market. Meanwhile, the difference has gone through the back. The 770 gets a CCI, you know, so CBN is trying to stamp that out, you know, but at the end of the day, if it happens, the guy still gets a good value for his funds.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. So I would just want to quickly mention, I see that a number of people have their hands raised. Can I please ask that we put our questions in the Q&A segment of the you know, in the pane below, so that those questions, again, we will have a bit of time for question and answers. So questions and answers. So please put your questions there, and they will be taken, you know, attended to appropriately. Okay. So Honorable Commissioner, this question, again, I see that in the course of the conversation, we seem to have addressed this when we were talking about liquidity and all of that. But maybe just to elaborate the point further, we see that the approach of the CBN, for instance, is to sort of reintroduce the providing FX to BDCs, right? I recall that in the recent circular on the operational mechanism for bureau de change operators, the conversation around releasing funds to them again to meet demands has come up again. What would be your view on this, and how do you think this creates liquidity in the market?
Look, I mean, I think, that BDC market is primarily a retail market, right? And for me, it's more accessibility and service, right? Not so much as, look, most of these flows, liquidity is going to come wholesale, right? A lot of those flows will have to come wholesale. I do think that the real work here is very quickly increasing liquidity, two, reducing the need for people to chase FX with Naira, right? So first, interest rates are too low. And we can go back and forth about where rates should be, but at current rates where people are potentially, having to save below inflation, and from a real return perspective, they're getting a negative return on those investments. You are forcing behavior to chase where people think there's an upside, which is on the currency side, And so there are a number of things that first need to happen to even change both consumer and wholesale behavior. If you bring in 1,000 BDCs, 500 BDCs, honestly, all that does is just creating, in my opinion, a lot more convenience for retail buyers and sellers of foreign currency. Now, if you think about each of us as individuals, right, what does a BDC do for you? It means you can get to the airport, you can sell, your FX there and get Naira as you enter Nigeria. If you come into the country, you have some foreign currency, you can sell to a bank, you get a Naira account credited, etc. It's not going to dramatically increase those flows, right? That's my view. Even when we talk about a lot of the remittance flows, right? First, a lot of those remittance flows, some of it doesn't come in cash, right? Some of it comes in, import of goods into the country. Even the ones that come in cash, right? You can't really completely eliminate your black market from this conversation. What eliminates the black market is when you have a convergence, right? So if you see when the official and parallel markets rates converge, people don't need to go. They can sell to bank, they can sell to BDC. It's meaningless. It's really just which one is more convenient to you. So I don't think, licensing BDCs, etc., is like dealing with a symptom. I think there's a broader disease. That's what you want to solve for. Once you solve for that, the symptom goes away. So I don't place a lot of emphasis on how the CBN decides to treat BDCs, right? If you say, if you go into some markets today, there are no retail BDCs. If you go into South Africa, for example, which is a good example, where there's some exchange controls, you have money transfer operators, a few of them, there are very few places where you can change money. You can change at the airport, you can change at your hotel. There's no Balogun market where you're going to see a BDC or a co-hotel of the past, but these exchanges still happen. So the real issue here is solving the problem. The problem is the supply side, right? And we have, I think, on this panel, explained a number of approaches that will help solve that supply side in the short, medium, and long term. Once we solve for that, it doesn't matter whether it's a BDC or it's a bank or it's a money transfer operator, and it doesn't even matter, to be honest, whether you go and get a CCI or not, right? Because you will get, when you want to exit, right, there's sufficient liquidity to help you exit. So all of these mechanisms are really more driving to the symptoms of the problem, not really solving the underlying disease. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the focus is on the underlying disease much more than the symptoms, which seems to be what we tend to be doing. Mr. Denowo, do you have any thoughts on this?
No, fully in agreement. It's about the enabling environment to ensure flows continue to come steadily, right? Not about licensing BDCs. I mean, BDCs, In most cases, many of them are waiting for rent. It's all about rent. Free flows come in, they sell. Do they have the ability to actually generate those flows? Those flows by themselves. I haven't seen them doing that. So let's attack the problem and not the symptom. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. So to the next question, and I'd like to pull a fast one on Mr. Onegunam from his experience. But before I come to him, I would like for the Honorable Commissioner to address, this issue of import dependence. And I know that's a conversation that we had on this call already, here already, dependence on imports and how that has impacted, the Nigerian economy generally. More specifically, I would want to say, what is your government in Ekiti State, for instance, doing to help the state earn in FX, right? And Ben, after his response, I would just like for you to give us generally an overview on what can be done, to improve FX earnings. Having learned at your feet, I know that these are the conversations that we have from time to time, but I would just like for you to, speak to them right after the Honorable Commissioner. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start. If you mention Ekiti State, that's where I'll start from. I think the first thing is we're very focused on enabling economic zones. And that for me is a big driver of getting us towards export discipline. So today we are establishing what we've called the Ekiti Knowledge Zone, which is a special economic zone focused on the service economy. So it's call center operations, it's business process outsourcing, it's creating a platform for technology businesses to run back office operations, etc., from remote locations. Now, for me, this is a big driver of Nigeria being export focused, right? Because business process outsourcing, by definition, is effectively saying we operate the service here and we serve, businesses outside of Nigeria. And there's no reason why we cannot organize ourselves as a country to be a dominant player here. Nigerians are known to speak relatively toneless English. Our time zone is very good to service Central Europe. We've got a fairly literate, youth population, and the labor and the wages in Nigeria are still much lower than Vietnam and the Philippines, for example. So we have a unique opportunity there, and that's what we're doing in Ekiti, to organize an economic zone around that space. We're also very active participants with the agri-processing zone, being championed by the African Development Bank. And again, for agri-processing zones, it's really about how much value you add to, primary products and how you can then move those products outside of your country, to earn foreign exchange across the world. And I think for me, one of the things we've looked at is how do we even dominate West Africa? So what are the food crops we can export to West Africa? What are the things we can send within the continent where we have some comparative advantage as being Africa's biggest economy? Can't just be a size conversation. It's in the balance of trade with countries within the continent. So that, from my state perspective, is how we are trying to organize towards, solving an export problem. I think on the import substitution side, look, I think we've done some things right, but we also always have to ask one question. What is our goal, right? Is our goal to increase domestic production, or is our goal to reduce costs of goods and services to consumers, right? So again, there are some products today where Nigeria can be argued to be self-sufficient, but Nigerians are buying those products at 3 or 4 times what they should cost. So take rice, for example, where rice production has grown significantly, but the cost of rice has tripled in that time, right? So to the consumer, when you say, oh, output has grown 3 times, they don't see that. The consumer doesn't eat output, I'm sorry. The consumer eats rice at a cost. So again, when we protect domestic producers, right, we must ensure that our competition, our anti-monopoly agencies are alive to their responsibilities to ensure that prices are not fixed, right, that the benefits of some of the subsidies and incentives that government is giving is passed on to the consumer. Because remember, if you were to ask the central bank, what is your primary job? The primary role of the central bank is to ensure price stability, right? From an economic perspective, right? So whatever you do, if prices are rising beyond control, there's a problem. So that's my only thing with import substitution, that we mustn't do it and create oligarchs, right? We must do it in a manner that when you substitute imports, the cost must go to the consumer. I think Mr. Adeno made a point around the transportation cost and the logistic cost, moving goods from China to Nigeria, being potentially cheaper than moving goods within the country. I mean, that's a misnomer. So a Chinese rice importer, all of a sudden, if someone imports rice from China, it's actually cheaper than rice we're getting from Wakot or whoever in Kebbi. You know, hopefully when the Immortal Rice Mill comes on board, you know, in full effect, we can see some of the benefits from that mill in how much we will pay for rice in Ekiti. It then makes sense because our farmers in Ekiti who have linkages with Lagos, right, can move the input into, you know, a mega mill, for lack of a better descriptor, right, in Lagos, and we all see the offsets in pricing. So I think the thing about import substitution is we must not just do it for the sake of doing it. We must ask ourselves, why are we doing it? The fundamental goal is to ensure there's price stability, is to ensure that we have, you know, growth in disposable income, right? And so that's what drives us. So we mustn't just say, hey, you know, we've gotten X cement self-sufficiency, we've gotten fertilizer self-sufficiency, we've gotten, you know, self-sufficiency in rice. But what does that mean for the consumer? You know, what are we transferring to that consumer? What benefits are we transferring to that consumer? And that, I think, is a completely different conversation. You know, we can have that debate for another 3 hours. But I think for me, that's how we should be driving the import substitution policy, you know, against a very clear goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that trickle-down effect to the consumer is really an important part of the conversation when it comes to import substitution. Mr. Onyegbunam, would you want to just...
Okay. One point I'd like to make is that the FX problem that we have, my opinion is that there may be two principal ways to deal with it. The first is to look at the demand side and then to look at also the supply side. A lot has been said about the supply side today. Clearly, there are so many things we can do, so many. But on the demand side, it's very clear that one of the a sizable chunk of FX demand in Nigeria goes to petroleum products. I know that government has done a lot in that space, and it is the hope that, as promised by the president, that one of these refineries will come on stream in December. Currently, we do not know now when the mega refinery that Dangote has built will come on stream, but that will also be significant, even though it may still not, Dangote's refinery may not solve, it will not likely solve our FX problem, but at least if there is local refining in Port Harcourt, which we understand will come on stream, one hopes that that will go a significant, you know, it will significantly reduce our FX demand for petroleum products. But Nigeria is a country that is loaded with minerals. It's loaded with minerals. We have gold, we have iron ore. Some say we have something that looks like uranium in Niger State. We have these minerals scattered all over Nigeria. And a lot of work has been done by our cadastral office towards mapping all these minerals and putting a proper legal structure for the mining of these minerals. But unfortunately, what do we have? We have stories of illegal mining everywhere. And there are also stories about this illegal mining actually causing insecurity in many parts of Nigeria. So that is one quick win that I imagine that government should focus on in order to ensure, it's a no-brainer. There's nobody that does not want gold. There is nobody that does not want gold. And if there is gold in Nigeria, that will be one very quick win. Honorable Oyebode mentioned call centers and business process outsourcing. We work for some of them, and we know the sort of numbers that they are doing. We have a huge population, and therefore a very huge human resource that can be trained to compete significantly in that space. so that if we begin to have call centers in Nigeria for the large corporates, the Microsofts and the Googles and the Apples of this world and organizations like that, that will, and we're going to be paid in dollars, because that will be a service we're rendering here to them offshore, and they're going to pay Nigeria in FX. It's going to be very significant. BOI has done a lot in the entertainment space, but I'm aware that a lot of the monies earned in the entertainment sector, some of it doesn't come in here. Some of it doesn't come in here. So government really needs to look at it, whether it is our tax structure that we need to look at again, or whether it is supply of FX, whatever needs to be done. Monies earned from Nigeria, a significant portion, we should make sure that we do whatever is necessary to make sure that a significant portion is here. Nigeria is a gas area, much, much less than crude oil. It's something we need to look at. We've heard about the Trans-Moroccan gas pipeline, but it is going to be a foreign investment, and it is going to move gas from somewhere in Nigeria through Morocco up to somewhere in Europe. We have the NLNG that is earning us a significant amount of money. Other such projects can also be looked at. Agri-processing. This is an area that you also, Dr. Sanford, we've also played some significant role in this space. And this is something that is very dear to my heart, very, very dear to my heart. But if you want to export in Nigeria, I believe it was Honorable Oyebode that also mentioned how difficult it is to export things here, the number of agencies that are at the port. I know that during Obasanjo's tenure, Dr. Konjo Iweala did something about having a one-stop shop at the port, streamlining things in order to ensure that exporting from Nigeria is not a nightmare. But let's even talk about before the goods get to the port. A client of ours decided to just look at what it takes to move goods from Benue State to Lagos State. And he said that within Benue State alone, there were more than 15 checkpoints by law enforcement agents. Okay, he said he could understand that. Yeah, maybe they have some security work they are doing, some legal work that they were doing. But what he said he found very disconcerting was a large numbers at different portions of the state of people who had no uniforms and who had nails, trying to stick nails into people's tires and all of that, who had no ID cards and who they had no reason to be on the road at all. That is a problem. So if that is what is found in Benue State alone, and all along the way, these things present challenges to people who actually are engaged in productive activity. Let's not forget that if we are exporting, we are also competing with other people who are producing similar goods. I hear now that China is cultivating yams and cassava in China and labeling it produced from uncontaminated soil. So we need to step up our game. Diaspora remittances has been mentioned, and we found out that diaspora remittances clearly exceed what we earn from oil. So we need to, I'm not saying we should just be sending our people abroad because we need a number of them there, but diaspora, our people in diaspora are a significant resource, not just because of the money that they send, but because also in collaboration with them, a lot of productive activities can take place offshore that can potentially end foreign exchange for Nigeria. There is tech. I think that is one area that Nigeria has done very good. The likes of Flutterwave, we know that they are making waves in the payment space, a lot of things that have been done there. And that is something that I believe also that Nigeria needs to continue to encourage. We need to look at our infrastructure. Infrastructure does not earn you dollars, but infrastructure will enable you produce. Infrastructure will enable you compete better. Lagos State is already doing a lot in that space, and we can only hope that, you know, it continues. The work being done in the Lekki Free Zone area is something that that is also very dear to my heart, because that axis, from Lekki, if goods can move to the north and back, from Lekki, if goods can move to the east and back, you can imagine what the potential is. These things will come straight to the port and from there exported. The free zones, the economic zones, the export processing zones, these are things that I think that government should continue to encourage, aggressively, in fact.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Nebunam. That's much appreciated. So again, for those who have questions, I see hands are still being raised. If there are questions, please put them in the chat box. I see a number of questions have been received already, and we will quickly get into that session. But in just 2 minutes, I crave your kind indulgence, Mr. Adinowo. We spoke to the cost of business especially for companies that are borrowed in USD, for instance. I'm sort of wondering, I don't want to put you on the spot, sir. What is Standard Chartered Bank sort of doing to help their customers in this sort of situation? And what do you advocate, that can be done in the short term, on a short-term basis to alleviate this cost and losses that these businesses are dealing with? In just 2 minutes, sir, if you can, please.
Okay. No, thank you. And I'll also comment on what Ben had mentioned. So the first thing we advise our clients at Standard Chartered Bank, Dr. Mba, is to always never leave your positions hedged. And therefore, we offer them NDFs, we offer them derivatives. So we will always offer you an NDF. The NDF obviously would not guarantee you liquidity, but at least it will guarantee you price stability when you get the liquidity. The other forms of derivatives also we would offer you. From 2020 to date, we sold derivatives in excess of triple digits in millions, to lots and lots of clients to guarantee them liquidity as well as stability. And we closed all those positions. We had foreign companies who wanted to support their local entities because their trade obligations couldn't be paid, and then we offered them the kind of derivative solutions where we would give them the liquidity today, and then we would do a buyback in another 18 months to 24 months, and they were all successful. So those were the kind of hedging products that we advise. We advised in the past, and we are still advising today. Now, when you talk about production, which Ben had alluded to, I dare say that the likes of virtually all or a significant portion of those working in that free zone, the factories, the petroleum companies that are all coming on stream there, we were lead arrangers. The Lekki Free Zone, Standard Chartered was lead arranger. A lot of the oil and gas concerns coming up there, we were lead arranger. But of course, for you to also get the benefits, again, we have all alluded to it. You need the infrastructure to be in place, you need the logistics to be seamless, and you need the policy frameworks to actually support them. We talked about, Honorable Commissioner Oyebode talked about BAT and 27 forms, to fill. A lot of those clients, we support them with export facilities, right? Many, believe it or not, whether you think Nigeria is bad, do you know that many multinationals had closed a lot of their West Africa factories and concentrated on producing in Nigeria and exporting to West and Central Africa? A lot of them are caught in these 27 forms they need to fill. Standard Chartered banks with banks, a lot of them. I take them through the NXP form process. And again, the NXP, like Ben said, one of the mitigants to ensure conversion is the NXP form. Getting them to fill an NXP form, CBN and the banks track to make sure that the dollars are converted. But for remittances is all about free will. The creatives, they earn the dollars out there. You cannot force them to bring the dollars. It is the enabling environment. And the reduction in the arbitrage. The higher the arbitrage, the less you see the inflows coming into the official markets. 16th January, when the market was reopened, we were seeing, as a Standard Chartered Bank, we were seeing remittances going up on a daily basis. My financial markets were tracking it. The moment the arbitrage started increasing, we could see that remittances were reducing. So we as an international bank have created that platform because we are here in Nigeria and we are all over the world. And therefore you get your inflows within 24 hours max. Same day or within 24 hours max. You get it into your accounts locally. And therefore we facilitate the inflow of remittances, into the country. And so that platform actually helps, in bringing in remittances, which we all agree far outweighs, the volumes of oil that we are actually producing. I've also championed, as a bank, Standard Chartered is also working with the Bankers Committee, and this is going to come out at the next Bankers Retreat. Why can foreign credit cards, why can't they be used on ordinary POSs in Nigeria? And I have tasked different people in the electronic environment, policymakers. Why must a foreigner take his card to an ATM? Because his card will not work. Before he gets to the ATM, he has abandoned his purchase. It's called customer acquisition. Do you know how much FX we are losing? Because the moment a Visa card or MasterCard goes into a POS, dollars actually inflows to the local bank that owns that POS. Lost revenue, lost FX. So that is something that Standard Chartered Bank is championing with policymakers within the payments platform, in CBN and also in all banks to say, why? Is it a hardware problem? Is it a software problem? We need to improve on the infrastructure, if it's a hardware or a software problem, to ensure that that actually works and remittances come in via just foreign cards acquisition on our POS terminals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. That's a good note to end my part of this of the session. I will then hand back now to Josephine to get on with the question and answer segment, to introduce my colleague who will take the question and answer segment. Thank you, panelists. Most grateful for the time.
Thank you very much, Sanford, and thank you very much to our panelists. At the beginning of this session, I promised us an engaging and interactive one, and even if I say so myself, I think we have delivered. And I trust that the audience will bring the same energy with their questions and the answers that will be given by the panelists. So I would move on very quickly to introduce my colleague and partner, Chinedu Kema, who is also a partner in Dentons, ACAS-Law, and advises on diverse transactions across various sectors in the industry in Nigeria. So Kema, please, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josephine. Certainly, it has been a stimulating conversation, and we have a number of questions to reflect that. I'll start with a question on hedging and the Nigerian derivatives market. And obviously, the panelists, one of the points raised is you can obviously hedge your foreign currency risk. Now, a participant is asking, is the Nigerian derivatives market and the supporting institutions strong enough to support foreign currency hedging?
Okay, so the answer is yes. Like I said, we did multiples of hundreds of millions as Standard Chartered Bank between 2020 to date. Not only did we guarantee the price for the corporates, we also ensured that they got the liquidity when they closed those positions and they settled. There were no failures. So yes, it is developed. The central bank also, through the FMDQ, has the NDFs. The NDF market is also there. That would guarantee you price, would not guarantee you liquidity, till obviously liquidity returns. But at least you are assured of the price at which you're doing your transaction. And the NDF window is not just for corporates alone. The NDF window is also for individuals, but of course you must have a CCI and an underlying trade transactions for you to transact. So yes, it is quite well developed, and the StanChart platform is available for you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And based off your last comment on CCI, I will delve into the question on CCI. So a participant is asking if the CCI framework currently in Nigeria is broad enough or is clear enough, because for some participants, there's no transparency in the entire CCI framework. Should the CBN issue more rules or document the rules governing the CCI framework in Nigeria? I don't know if Mr. Ben wants to take this.
I don't think that will be correct.
Yeah, that's right.
The CCI framework is very clear.
Yeah.
But you will bring in your money into Nigeria through official channels, and within 24 hours, you get your electronic CCI through the commercial bank, an authorized dealer that you're transacting with. And you will have that CCI issued in the name of the foreign investor and procured by the local investee entity. That foreign investor will hold that document as, whether it is for loan or whether it is for equity, will hold that document as evidence of an investment into Nigeria, and whether it is dividend or proceeds of divestment, or whether it is a remittance of principal or interest on the loan and all of that, the process is very clear. The process is very clear. So, I mean, if the person that asked the question is still on the call, it really will be better for me to understand a bit more what he means by non-transparency, so that we can address it better.
Yeah,
I would also say that it is very robust, moved from a manual platform to an electronic platform. Also, don't forget, I mean, even from A transactions and from M transactions, all your PTA, BTA, everything is now electronic, easily captured, by the central bank and by the banks. So the CCI process, I think, very, very super robust. Where I think we can give a little bit of wiggle room, the 24 hours at times can be quite tight, and yes, it forces conversion. And very quick conversion, which is an advantage. I would recommend a little bit more hours, maybe 48 hours. But again, I'm not a policymaker. They see it, from, they have the helicopter view. They are standing at the balcony. I am inside the weeds. So they see much more than we do. But for a lot of corporates and individuals, it may be a bit tight to abide by 24 hours.
Thank you. I'll definitely say to the participant, please obviously contact Mr. Ben, and you can reach out to Standard Chartered, and they'll put you through in terms of the CCI process. And I'll go to the next question, and this is like a broad question. The question is there a role that private businesses can play in supporting, promoting, or contributing to the stability of FX in Nigeria? I see Honorable Gube wants to take this.
So first of all, Nigeria is a country of individuals and enterprises. And when you take Lagos, for example, the Lagos state government only contributes about under 3% of the Lagos state GDP. So it's always important. It is how the capacities and the behaviors of the firms and the individuals are moderated, collaborated, guided, that produces the outcome. So when we say policies should not be abrupt, right? So for example, if you come with the paradigm that your people are trying to, a generality of your people are trying to frustrate the system, then you tend to hide the policies and you catch them unawares. But if you come with the paradigm that there are a lot of good people doing business, then it's important that we come to the table with a lot of transparency. We give people lead time to adjust to new policies, and then we encourage them to do the right thing, right? It is true also that in every society, you will always have people that just don't understand, don't like rules, and going against rules is the meaning they give to freedom, right? So those you need transparent enforcement as well. So it's not just predictability of policy, but predictability of consequence, right? So you know that if you moved in a particular direction, you can guess what will happen to you. Now that then moderates behavior on a broader sense of it, and so everything you are putting in to stimulate export, to stimulate production, will get past the system, because the generality of the people will then behave the way you want them to behave. But if it is you just trying to capture people, right, then people will behave like hunters and like birds trying to duck and dive, right? And so the entire environment becomes extremely chaotic. So firms should see their business from a national interest perspective, right? Not necessarily to behave primarily nationalistically, but as a second level, while they do business based on their own strategic interest, they should ensure that those businesses are not in conflict with national interests at the same time. But again, governments, both federal, state, and local governments, must be seen as trying to support, trying to help, trying to provide service, trying to encourage growth. Businesses are not enemies of state, you understand? And once you feel that way, you will even begin to see that your nationals around the world will respond favorably to you in the amount of remittances they bring in. They are more interested in building homes in their villages, in their cities, you know, so because they feel they will come home one day, or they will trade with Nigeria one day. So those are the things. So just summarizing that, we need predictability in our policies. We need lead time to allow the citizens respond to it so that they are not hot or caught in the crossfire of it. We need to be able to be accountable as a government. If you see the transparency indices, right, in a lot of the developing environment, when you take the Asian tigers like Korea, for example, South Korea, you will see that the participation, the e-participation index is directly correlated to development, right? So it's important also that, you know, sometimes governments tend to think that transparency is risky for their objective, right? Their enemies will take advantage of it and move against them. But hey, the general population is not an enemy. They are your citizens, right? So, and transparency tends to help investment and development. If you look at the biggest companies in the world, they are PLCs, and the requirements for reporting and transparency is so high. Now, if it was bad, they would not be the biggest companies in the world, right? And I think government should begin to engage that way as well, so that as citizens improve trust in themselves and in their government, they are going to take the right steps, make the right kind of investments that help national objectives to be met.
Thank you so much, Honorable Gube. I see Mr. Ben nodding in agreement. I don't know if he has anything to say to sort of chime in. You're muted, Mr. Ben.
Apologies. I'm in complete agreement. Okay. Once the rules are clear, once the enforcement is even, and once the consequences of any infraction are predictable, and the rules, there is a clear understanding that rules are made for man and not the reverse, things will work better, seamlessly. And it is those people in the private sector that will employ our people and make us happy. They will pay our taxes, they will make us happy. We tick Government ticks because of them. You and I also tick as professional advisors because of them. They are the ones that give us work. But I think Honorable Oyebode, who is also an administrator, should be in a position to elucidate more on that.
Exactly.
Okay, I see I've been put on the spot. I mean, I think it's a fairly, to be honest, it sounds like a fairly straightforward thing to discuss, right? Always one of my favorite periods to read about is on how General Park transformed South Korea. And it does have a bit of autocracy in it, right? Because again, the fact that we are in a fairly young democracy also limits how well consequence management is effected, right? Because consequences sometimes have real political outcomes that often prevent those in the role, to apply the consequences as required. Now, if you say markets, this is a transparent process, right? Optics for me will be very important, where if there's a breach to this process, there's a consequence immediately applied and it's applied transparently. If you think about the Park era in Korea, the Korean government provided significant incentives to indigenous companies solely to drive export of products. That's what led to Daewoo Racer being driven all around Lagos by wealthy young Lagosians in the 90s. But if you fail to meet those export targets, General Park had no problem putting you in prison, right? And he did it publicly to say, look, you can enjoy all of this stimulus from the government, right? But if you fail to achieve the outcome we want, there are also consequences. So before you enjoy the stimulus, recognize that there are consequences for these actions. Now, my only challenge with, and I think the improvements we need, is even in our FX markets, how we support industries. It has to be very transparent. We mustn't give any sense that there's been some state capture. And I'll give you a real example. As a state government, we're a minority shareholder in a dairy business, right? Which I know Mr. Adenowo banks, right? We went to the central bank to request for foreign exchange for a very, very credible importation of cows. Simply because your local Fulani red Bororo cows will give you 2 liters of milk a day, right? The Jersey cattle will give you 30, right? The Scandinavian breeds will give you 40 to 45 liters. So I went to the central bank and said, give us FX to import cows, right? We were turned down. No, we're not even turned down. We're just put on hold. Meanwhile, our competitors who went to the same bank for similar needs got their full FX allocation, right? These are companies who are competing in the same sector of the economy. And by providing foreign exchange to one and not providing to the other, you basically picked winners, right? Now, in such a regime, you cannot expect any productive activity to happen. Because 3 companies in the same sector, one gets preferential allocation of foreign exchange, the other 2 don't, and there are no metrics to determine who gets what and why, right? So where resources are scarce, they must be allocated transparently. Because if we don't, we'll spend a lot more time and resources on arbitrage, on influence peddling, on middleman transactions. And that's where the value then is, not on the productive activity. Look, an economy, that's why the invisible hand is there, right? If you signal to people that the real value is not bringing capital, not taking risk, just being able to call someone to say allocate FX to X, everyone is going to migrate their activity and attention to that place. So everything that the speakers have said, 100% in alignment with. The real discussion here is not about the policy, right? The real discussion is really about our ability to implement those policies. And yes, as a public administrator, for example, in our state, one of the things that we've completely removed is government being in business, right? Because we recognize that as long as we have a horse in the race, right, then it's impossible for private entities to think they have a fair crack at competing with government interests. So what we're doing now is winding down our position in government related entities, right? And the aim is to wind that down to 0, in the medium term, to give people a signal that we are only here as a regulator. So if you think about our electricity markets in Ekiti today, we are not setting up an electricity distribution company. Let the private distributors come and do that. Let the IPPs come and do that. Our role is primarily to regulate the market. So where possible, for example, in Ekiti, we are not acting as operator and regulator, right? And we are not also giving specific people preferential treatments. If you want to do business in the state, the rules are clear. If you meet the conditions, you get what you want. If you don't, well, sorry, thank you. You know, and it's by walking that talk consistently that the private sector starts to trust, one, our integrity, and then starts to respond to that by doing the right things. We reward the right activity, you get the right outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Iboli. I'm mindful that we're out of time because we can discuss for another 1 hour. So I'll sort of wrap up. To the participants, I apologize for not taking all your questions. Please send us an email. We'll definitely respond to your questions. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much to the panelists. Just feedback to you.
Thank you very much, Kema, and thank you very much to everyone for staying on, even though we've overshot our time very a little bit. So just to wrap up some of the things that we have seen as recurring themes, you know, the need for transparency, the need for accountability, the need to have a bit more certainty in the system. And I like the point that has been made that if we demand these things from the government, then as businesses also, we should demand them from private businesses, and I dare say even private citizens. And I hope that we go beyond, you know, just discussing these things, and as time goes on, we see the implementation and we see how these things unfold. I would call on my colleague now to give the vote of thanks. Inyola Adekoya is a partner in the Energy and Project Finance Department and also in the Financial Services team. And she will be coming on to give the vote of thanks now. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Dentons ACAS-Law, I would like to express our profound gratitude to everyone for attending today and for directly or indirectly contributing to this webinar. Special thanks to our distinguished panelists in the persons of Honorable Samuel Igube, Mr. Olukorede Adinowo, Honorable Akintunde Oyebode, and Mr. Ben Uligunam. I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone present when I say that we have truly been enriched by your wealth of knowledge and your presence. I would also like to appreciate our Q&A host, Chinedu Kema, our MC, Josephine Udon-Sak, our moderator, Dr. Sanford, and everyone else that was part of the organizing committee. Finally, but equally as important, I'd like to say a big thank you to all the attendees for your time and engagement. Without your presence, this webinar would simply not be. As all good things come to an end, so has this webinar. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.